It's been almost 1 year after Bloober Team released their Silent Hill 2 remake, and after the news that they are to remake Silent Hill 1, I decided to play this game to see what the current philosophy of Bloober Team is. Whether they've learned anything after the Silent Hill 2 remake, or if they would double down on the formula that ruined the cult classic and is currently replacing it completely in the collective consciousness of the internet. At this rate, in a year or two from now, we're gonna have to scroll down 5 kilometers on Google to find anything about the original game because it's being buried by the sloppy remake, despite all the shills swearing to the contrary that the game is not there to replace the original. Sure. And after I was done with this game, I can confidently conclude that they've shifted from making boring walking simulators to making boring, repetitive, and unnecessarily long action horror games using the same formulas as The Last of Us and the Resident Evil 2 remake. This time, Cronos: The New Dawn is their attempt at making a Dead Space clone, which is completely unsurprising given their history of less than zero creativity. They rose to notoriety by making a Silent Hills PT clone, after all, let's never forget that, but managed to make it into an even more boring walking sim, so it's no surprise that they've now decided to rip off another successful franchise and make it worse, with all the tiresome tropes like time travel and plot twists that are as predictable as your average Redditor's political opinion. The funniest thing is that this game seems to have bombed. Even after all the paid shills, the sellouts, the botted shilling campaigns on the subreddit glazed their SH2 remake as the next greatest thing after Jesus Christ, which should have translated into very positive numbers for their next title. And although this game isn't a remake, it again uses the same formula as the Resident Evil remakes and the Silent Hill 2 remake they made themselves. So maybe Bloober Team will take that as feedback and not turn Silent Hill 1 into another action horror with 400 enemies for you to fight and a generic third-person camera over the shoulder. But I'm not too optimistic about that. Realistically, and knowing this studio's history, they will keep doing the same they've ever done, ripping off what is trendy at the moment. And if Silent Hill F does well, which it will probably do, since it's the newest Souls-like, which is what all the normies like, since it's difficult, dude, because difficult necessarily means the game is good and deep. Yeah, the new Souls-like that Konami is dropping for a psychological horror game franchise for some reason, that had game journalists take an hour to beat a boss.
Boss took me nearly an hour to beat, but gradually learning how to take on the boss was a welcome challenge that never felt unfair. For reference, my colleague was playing on story mode and defeated the boss on his second try, but an acquaintance from another media outlet who was also playing on story mode didn't manage to defeat the boss at all and ran out of time.
If that does well, it would surprise me if Bloober didn't use it as the mode for the Silent Hill 1 remake, completely sealing the fate of that franchise and killing it once again, turning it into another generic action horror franchise instead of the terrifyingly deep and unbearably tense psychological horror franchise that we used to know. But anyway, let's talk about the actual subject of the video. Cronos: The New Dawn is a Dead Space ripoff that takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. A world that was ravaged by a disease and by some time travel world-bending shenanigans. But I'll start with the gameplay. The gameplay is what you would expect from the current stale action horror fever. You got your typical over-the-shoulder camera that pretty much guarantees that the game will be as scary as a 5-year-old child threatening to hurt you. This has got to be the least scary alleged horror game that I've played in my life. Even Resident Evil 4 had a scarier atmosphere than this game. Not a single one of the sudden jump scares that begin to pop in later on in the game even managed to make me angry, as most cheap jump scares do, let alone startle me. But at least the over-the-shoulder camera did not get in the way and made the combat torture when I was backed into a corner, which is sadly not something I can say about their Silent Hill 2 remake, so I guess they've improved that combat a little this time around. The game has many safe rooms called outposts throughout the campaign where you can save your game, buy, sell and upgrade items, a chest for inventory management, supplies, and they also contain a dispenser that ensures that you will always have at least one torch fuel, which are essential if you don't want to have a nightmare of an experience with the combat. And speaking of combat, the gunplay is blandly simple. Unlike in Dead Space where you could tear away limbs from the enemies with your plasma cutter, you get very basic weapons like a revolver, a shotgun, and later on an assault rifle and a sort of railgun, if you can find it, that fires a very powerful projectile but has very scarce ammo. You can shoot the enemies anywhere you like, with places being exposed skin, or rather meat, that are unprotected and deal more damage. In most combat situations, you are provided with conveniently placed gas tanks, which one-shot most enemies, so you can just run around, juking the enemies, baiting them to get close to the tanks and do away with them at once. In some situations, there are so many barrels that it's laughable and it breaks the immersion completely. The game pretty much requires you to burn dead enemies with your torch, proximity mines, or flammable gas tanks placed on the map. They won't come back to life if you don't, but if an enemy comes to the dead body of one of theirs, they will absorb it and level up, becoming a pain in the ass to deal with. If they absorb 2 enemies and get to level 3, they become utter bullet sponges, which will require a lot of resources for you to kill. So the best thing to do is to avoid that and burn the enemies that you can. This requires a little bit of planning, which adds depth to the combat, which is nice. You'll often be finding forced combat arenas where you have to survive and kill all the enemies in order for the doors to open up and allow you to proceed. These happen so often that the game gets too predictable and boring real fast. Oh, but this is not the only repetitive thing this game does. We'll talk more about that in a moment. The bosses were decent, not much to complain about, but not great either. Although the hit radius of some of their attacks is bigger than what they look, which is annoying, and the game starts rehashing these bosses later on. The enemy variety is okay, maybe a little bit too small. There's your basic zombie, there's your big zombie, there's your wall zombie who attacks you from behind corners, there's your crawly zombie that walks on walls and the ceiling, and there are enemies that act like proximity mines and they even jump at you. Unfortunately, none of the enemies have that oh shit factor like the Licker from Resident Evil. Even the big guys are pretty easy to dispatch. 3 charged shots with the shotgun on their heads is enough. The only real trouble, like I said, is if they merge and level up. One nitpick that I have, which is not that big of a deal, but it got me taking unnecessary damage when I was trying to adjust my character, is that the side strafe speed when you're aiming is too slow. You can upgrade that later on, but it's so late in the game that it doesn't make much difference. But it's not that big a deal. Now for the really bad parts of the gameplay. If you played the Silent Hill 2 remake and liked the nauseatingly repetitive gimmicks that Bluebird team employed, like pushing a cabinet out of the way 20 fucking times, or squeezing through this narrow passage 30 times, then you'll love this game. There are also lots of doors that are chained up, and you have to use bolt cutters that fill up inventory space. There are so many of these doors that you'll either have to carry these bolt cutters with you at all times or risk having to do the time-consuming slog task of running back and forth from the chained-up door to the previous outpost, retrieve the bolt cutters, cut the chain, run back to the outpost to store the tool again because it occupies inventory space, run back to the now unchained door and get the extra supplies now that you have enough free space. There were so many times where I found myself running back and forth from proceeding in a new area to the outpost over and over again because there is no way to know when the next outpost is going to be, and there were so many fights I had to go through in a row sometimes that my resources were depleted, so I had to run back to get more because I didn't want to risk getting into another fight without resources and dying and having to do it all again, only to find a chained up door, run back to the outpost to get the bolt cutters, unlock the door, then run back, then return to get the items, only to find that I didn't have enough inventory space anyway, inventory, run back to free up more space, then go back and get the remaining items over and over and over. Look at how many times, for instance, I had to do this here. I saved every time I went back to the outpost, and it's just ridiculous. I wasted so much time in an already super padded out game doing this because of this repetitive bolt cutter bullshit. They could have made it a challenge that could be solved intuitively in the moment without having to carry your bolt cutters with you all the time. And this game drags on and on. Like their shitty Silent Hill 2 remake, this game has a shit ton of padding. It took me over 15 hours to complete it according to the endgame statistics, but it felt more like 24 hours in the campaign because it stretches out so much. Cut away 5 or 6 hours and the length would have been adequate. By the 10th hour, it was already clear what was happening, what was going to happen, who the villain was, what the twist would be, so it just shouldn't be this long. Bloober got so much positive feedback from the normies and tourists who loved their shitty butchered Silent Hill 2 remake, which has 10 fucking hours of padding as well, that they decided it was a great idea to pad the shit out of this game too. It gets really exhausting after a certain point. Then there's the yellow paint. Oh good lord, please get this crap out of my games. I can't take it anymore. These game devs are so dumb and uncreative that they project that onto the player. They think that the player is as dumb as them, and so they put yellow paint everywhere to make sure you don't miss anything ever. They will not allow you to use your brain and get immersed in the game's world. There's yellow paint on the breakable crates. There's yellow paint on the doorknobs. There's yellow paint on the items you can pick up. There's yellow paint on the obvious boards you have to break to proceed. Hey players, there's a secret area with some goodies here. Look at this gigantic yellow door. If a ledge is climbable, there's the same white paint to make sure you, as the brain dead gamer that they think you are, won't miss them. It's so patronizing. Their obsession with realism in the graphics, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the level design makes it hard to design places that are intuitive and fun and naturally lead your eyes to points of interest, so they have to put bright radioactive glowing yellow paint to make sure they direct you properly. It completely breaks the immersion and the believability of the game. It constantly reminds me of the presence of the devs guiding me like an ever-present looming entity. And if that isn't enough, then you have quest markers available at the press of a button, which shows how Bloober prefers to lazily assemble assets to make a level instead of using actual planning and good design. And so they slap quest markers to guide you if you get lost in their levels that all look the same everywhere you go. And speaking of tired, overused, stale mechanics, of course this game has a bare bones crafting system where you pick up materials to craft resources like ammo and healing items. Like all the Resident Evil games, all the remakes, all the modern shit does. It's an unnecessary extra step where they could have just put the actual items in the environment for you to pick up. It makes the exploration more rewarding that way than exploring to find some useless resource that has to be processed and turned into an useful item afterwards. There are some valuables that you can pick up to sell later, but they're also almost always the same. You'll mostly find the same items: an energy bank, a camera, and a fan heater. There are other more rare items like a game console and an energy slate, which is the most valuable, but the point is that it's mostly the first 3 items over and over again, and the only use they have is for selling them for energy, which is the currency of the game. Why not just make different sizes of energy pickups? They actually did this, but the most you'll find are pickups that give you 400 energy, and anything more than that are in the valuables that take up inventory space until you sell them. It's just another pointless gimmick that adds nothing to the world, to the lore, to anything. It just makes the game more clunky with the whole inventory management, and it created more situations where I had to run back and forth to pick up items and free inventory space at the outpost. This is an action horror game as much as it denies it. It doesn't need to create so many problems with inventory management. The puzzles. The puzzles are so brain dead easy that I don't even know why they exist at all. They're just there to delay you, if anything. The anomaly puzzles require you to use a whopping 2 brain cells to complete. It's literally just shifting one thing to get the rubble out of the way and shifting it back again to put it back in place depending on your necessity. It's just a time waster. Not to mention that their placement is so convenient that, just like with the explosive barrel crutches, completely breaks immersion and the believability of the game's world. Later on, there's another type of puzzle where you have to conduce the electricity from one spot to the other to activate something, and just like the previous type of puzzle, is just there to waste your time and give you a false sense of accomplishment. And I say false because accomplishment without challenge might give you a superficial dopamine release, but like anything shallow, I got sick of it real fast, and whenever I found another one of these, I got frustrated because I knew it would be just a time waste when I just wanted to get on with the game. Other than that, there are some rooms that are blocked which require you to shoot something in the room from a certain direction to open up the door. It's also repetitive. Hell, I'm getting sick of pointing out how repetitive this game is. Bloober Team is the least creative game studio that has ever existed, and the game even points this out, ironically, like they're trying to be funny. Oh haha guys, we know it's repetitive, ha ha ha, like that makes it okay somehow. The best quote-unquote puzzles, if you can even call them that, are the locked doors that you have to find the keys for. It's the most rewarding of them, and it's not even that rewarding, but compared to the previous quote-unquote puzzles, at least they're not as boring to do and feel natural, unlike the forced anti-immersive time-wasting BS that they littered that game with. And of course there's the zero gravity sections, where they blatantly ripped off the zero gravity segments from Dead Space. Like, they have no shame at all. Just aim at a place and press a button to leap to it in a straight line, exactly like how Dead Space did it. Are they going to patent this shit like they did with the Medium? Patenting game mechanics that were done before they even existed as a studio? Let's hope not, but I wouldn't put it past these guys. Also, this game has some of the most static environments I've ever seen. There's no feedback at all if you shoot or punch anything in the environment. Every object is made of diamond and is glued to the floor and walls with super glue from the future. I know this isn't an Unreal Engine 5 issue because it's well capable of doing physics even if they're janky. So this is an issue of laziness from Bloober Team once again. That's pretty much it for the gameplay. It's mid. It's the very essence of mid. The graphics are also extremely generic. Being another Unreal Slop Engine 5 game, this looks like every other UE5 game that you see everywhere, because this engine is being pushed to everyone, to all the devs, because that's all they know how to use today, apparently. This game looks exactly like Silent Hill 2 D-Make sometimes. It wouldn't surprise me if they reused a bunch of assets from that game in this one. The game, like every other UE5 game, sits in this uncanny valley where it tries to look as good as a truly path-traced rendering, but instead looks blurry, smeary, the edges are horribly soft, and they flicker with the upscale temporal anti-aliasing that UE5 uses. There were a bunch of times where Lumen just had a stroke and flashed light in my face for no reason. Direct lighting looks bland, and honestly this game looks uglier than many older games that use static lighting, which don't have all these weird artifacts and ghosting and smearing that UE5 has. Just look at how splotchy the indirect lighting is. If you move your weapons too fast, it leaves this trail of light because the temporal accumulation is so damn long. There were so many times that I was misled into thinking that there was an item for me to pick up in the dark because UE5's shitty lighting system and its reflections shine in the exact same way that some items that you can pick up shine. This tech is 20 years too early to be handled by consumer computers, and all all the cheats and shortcuts they use to try to make it runnable on today's computers just make it look disgusting. And even with all these shortcuts, the game runs like trash. I have a pretty beefy PC, not the most powerful anymore, but this game got down under 20 FPS on a 3080 Ti sometimes. It stutters constantly, which is even worse than having a consistently low frame rate. And this game, because of these stutters, crashed my audio drivers several times. I have a Scarlett audio interface and I've never seen anything like this before. This engine is an abomination, and needless to say, it comes with the graphics. The game has no art style. It looks generic, but I'm sure the normies who love shiny graphics will eat this shit and dig it anyway. These are the types of games that will age like milk because graphics age while art style doesn't. And for the soundtrack, it's extremely unremarkable. There's not a single track that I will be listening to outside the game because it's just so bland. There's nothing to comment on really. It's probably the most generic horror game soundtrack that I've ever come across in my life. And it's not surprising considering that the OST for the Silent Hill 2 remake, whenever it wasn't Yamaoka's tracks playing but some other dude from Bluebird team, it was extremely bland as well. Completely soulless this time around as well. Modern games have a real problem when it comes to their soundtrack. All of them sound uninspired. They sound like packaged filler products instead of expressions of the musicians, if these soundtracks are even made by musicians. I'm starting to think that game studios might already be using AI, or at least the music producers they delegate the music to are most definitely using it. The music you're hearing right now is actually from the game, but it sounds more like the soundtrack for a sloppy Hollywood movie trailer than a game's soundtrack. The sound design is also mediocre, nothing at all to comment on. It's just boring. It puts me to sleep. I imagine that after working on the Silent Hill 2 remake, whose original counterpart has one of the best sound designs ever in a video game, that Bluebird would have learned something from it, but no. Again, this is the least scary horror game I've ever played, and most of that is probably due to there being no sound design. It's just filler. So I'm now going to summarize the plot and drop some opinions along the way. You play as a traveler, ND-3576, and it's incredible how similar she sounds to Mangela from their SH2 remake that I thought it was the same voice actress, but it's not. Anyways, travelers are like a bunch of people in a kind of spacesuit who are kept in stasis and awaken after the previous traveler has failed their mission and died. You work for the collective, and just by the name you'll know it's not a good thing, which is a mechanical hive mind of people from who the travelers have extracted their essence, in other words their consciousness or their soul, killing them in the process and uploading them to this collective through a terminal. I don't think it's ever explained where these travelers come from, when they've started doing what they do and other stuff, but they're a thing now that is allegedly trying to preserve mankind's survival by doing this, considering the state of the world. The world has met its end during the Polish communist regime in the 80s. Due to the outbreak of a horrible disease. I don't know, man. I see a commentary being made here by Bluebird, almost as if communism creating and spreading an illness that ruined the world as we know it wasn't a thing that happened recently. In Minecraft, of course. No, it's just coincidence. Communism is great. It's all sunshine and rainbows and all good intentions. There's no way a bloodthirsty totalitarian ideology would ever let something like this happen. No. It's just that real communism hasn't been tried yet, guys. We just need to starve 100 million more people to death in Roblox, and then it will work. Anyway, this illness horribly mutates people and makes them merge with each other, turning them into mindless, zombie-like amalgamations. It's never clearly explained where this virus came from, but it's strongly hinted that it originated in the Steelworks, a place where they conducted experiments and shit. So the outbreak happened and the world went to shit completely shortly after. So the travelers came to be sometime in the far future, They can time travel to go back in time and try to figure out what the hell happened and ways to make mankind survive, or at least that's what we're told for a while. So over the course of the game, we are tasked with finding specific targets of interest to the collective and extract their essence to upload it to the hive mind as a way to quote-unquote save them from the ruined fate of the world. Among them, there's a guy who's portrayed as a schizo, but was actually right. Wow, imagine, shocker. He knew everything the socialist government was doing was a front, and their actions were making the situation with the deceased worse, keeping them locked up like cattle, like they did during the coup. Then, we extract either one of two brothers who worked at the steelworks where everything went to shit. We can choose which one we extract, but I don't think it has any consequence to the ending, whatever choice we make here. We also meet another traveler who is called the Warden, and he fixes things and tells us about lore occasionally. He has some anger issues and is a bit of an eccentric. Bloober once again does not know the concept of subtlety, and so who this guy really is completely predictable. Then the next target is a Dr. Zibbert, who knew a lot about the epidemic, and we meet a woman named Veronica who is totally not us, guys. Bloober's writing is so good, totally unpredictable. I totally didn't know the obvious twist because of how much the game glazes this woman as some kind of last hope for mankind or some shit because she's so stunning and brave. The game's not woke at all. Bloober is so base because it pretends to shit on communism, right? Yeah, sure. And so we find the doctor, and after sucking yet another soul out of someone's body, things start to go really bad for a traveler. She begins to be haunted by the souls in her brain, and we start to get some occasional jump scares that I mentioned previously. By this point, it's clear that we're not doing anything good to these people, and this whole BS of saving them is nothing but hubris. When we return to base, the Warden tells the traveler that she's losing her identity because the souls in her brain can't tell anymore who's who, sort of like a severe case of DID, and she has to find this traveler who is being kept in captivity in the steelworks, who is actually a special boy, a special kind of traveler called the Pathfinder, in order to fix the terminal and free our mind of the souls that are scrambling it. So we make our way there, fight our way through a church, and fight the boss. We find out that the Pathfinder is already dead, the Warden has lied to us about him being alive, and after picking up the body of the Pathfinder, we make our way back to the base where, shocker, the Warden is nowhere to be seen and the terminal is broken. What a surprise, who could ever see that coming, right? Wow. Exploring the police station, we find out that the Warden had been experimenting on other travelers as well. Then the big shocker, the big M. Night Shyamalan plot twist comes. We were Veronica all along. Wow, who could have seen it coming? Earlier on in the game, you can acquire the essence of a dead traveler, and when you see it on your phylactery menu, it's just a regular person. So it's a pretty obvious sign. Coupling that with the fact that the protagonist is trying to figure out the truth about things and about who she is and how the game glazed Veronica earlier, you'd have to not be very bright not to see this coming. This writing just sucks. It's not smart. It shifts from being an interesting mystery early on with the disease and the whole mystery of what went down at the steelworks, but it falls flat, completely fails to deliver, and turns into an identity crisis melodrama with the main character. It's the typical identity crisis that disturbed individuals who like to mutilate themselves have, so I don't doubt for a second that the main character is a self-insert of one of them. After we rip off our past self's mangled body like a they-them rips off his own genitals, the Warden appears all mad at us for ruining his plan, telling us that he just wanted to preserve Veronica because she was his unicorn and the last woman alive is the final hope for mankind. But this game isn't woke at all, by the way. And he merges with the Pathfinder, pulls out a sickle, and using the power of communism, pulls off a literal Virgil. I mean, seriously, the guy slashes a portal open with his Yamato sickle to another timeline to try and undo what we've done and start the cycle all over again. We go after him, and after another boring section of repetitive gameplay, we fight the final boss. After killing the Warden / Pathfinder or whatever the fuck, I hope he won't sue me for dead naming him or using the incorrect pronouns. our stunning and brave queen, Veronica, appears again and begs us not to kill the motherfucker. Then we can choose one of two endings. If we spare him, he and Veronica go back in time. And then everything goes to shit again because she immediately catches the disease. And the warden / pathfinder swears that he's going to do it right this time and does the exact same shit again. If we choose to kill him to end the cycle, Veronica goes back in time and gets infected anyway. So both regular endings are bad. The only good ending is a secret one where the pathfinder lets the newest lesbian couple go back in time together, and that's the only way humanity has any chance of survival. But the game is not woke, guys. After all, Bloober Team shits on socialism supposedly in this game, right? That's pretty much it for the plot. Now, it has to be said once again that Bloober Team employed DEI consultancy for this game. Once again, hit detection is in the credits and also aggro consulting. Now, I don't know about aggro, since their consultancy website has less information about consultancy than QuakeCon has information about Quake, but hit detection is unapologetically DEI. Never forget that Jacob Geller, the consultant that worked in the Silent Hill 2 remake, actually hates you if you're a gamer. And although he in particular didn't work on this game, his name is not on the credits, I personally went to take a gander at what kind of ideological stances these consultants for this game have in the disgusting cesspit that is Blue Sky, because it's only there where they take off their masks, and, well, aside from it being obvious based on what they look like, you can guess what kind of reaction they had and what they were most concerned about after learning of the recent political minecrafting of Charlie Kirk, who they clearly didn't like not one bit, and it's not looking good. So considering that these people, and I say people with many quotes, have consulted for this game, it explains how ugly the women in this game are, how the plot revolves around glazing a typical millennial looking woman who works in STEM and is strong and independent, and how the game vilifies men, painting one as a rabid conspiracy theorist lunatic, even though he was right, the main villain being an unredeemable male who does everything wrong no matter how many times he tries, and how it also takes a jab at Christianity, being that the second to last assignment takes place in a church where everything went to shit, featuring the most grotesque amalgamation of a boss. Like, the game tries so hard to paint Veronica as a caring, empathetic woman to the point where it doesn't even make sense. She doesn't want us to extract Dr. Zibbert even though he's pretty much already dead, and if he isn't, he's suffering being a part of this spiral of flesh that has consumed him. So what difference does it make if we extract him or not, and extraction happens to be bad as well? She doesn't give any good reasons to oppose it other than that she's a woman, and it's so patronizing that I didn't buy for a moment that she's supposed to be likable, being one and the same as the main character and all. She also takes a jab at guns. There's no elaboration or argument, it's just signaling for the brain-dead leftists who think guns are evil and scary, as if the problem wasn't that the guns are in the hands of bloodthirsty maniacs known as communists, but they'll keep repeating this ad nauseum because it's the propaganda that you're supposed to eat. Don't you love when video games preach to you their far left ideological talking points that you hear from the morons on TV, like late night talk show quote-unquote comedians? I'm sure all the Redditors that play this game are kicking their feet and clapping. They're very well represented in this game, I tell you. It's also funny, I got a weird glitch in the mission after picking up the Pathfinder's corpse. My character got stuck in a state where she couldn't run, she couldn't shoot or do anything else other than walk, and I couldn't even turn her around, so I had to slowly walk backwards to the next objective. I only realized it was a glitch later because one of the audio logs wouldn't play as well. It was a big waste of time. There's also this cringy, wholesome Reddit Chungus tier writing in the fact that our protagonist is literally a cat lady. She keeps bringing all these stray cats she finds throughout the game to her apartment, like some bitter middle-aged single woman who made all the wrong decisions in their life for too long and can't find a man to save her life. Like, this shit isn't even Reddit anymore, it's a degree worse. This was written by a Tumblrina. It's definitely some of that DEI representation of the underrepresented groups that hit detection flaunts on their website. And the warden, oh my lord, he literally worships these cats. Oh, don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with cats at all. It's just that video games and fiction in general, it's for escapism. It's not supposed to remind me of real life, of real people stuff. I don't want to be reminded of the idiocracy, and this is straight out of it. Jeez, at least make an allegory out of it. Put it this way, whenever I see a character in a video game bringing memes, bringing behavior from the real world into the game, especially when it's current life events and behaviors, it makes these characters feel as if they are just playing pretend, like there's just a regular person underneath the spacesuit here who's just LARPing as a traveler who's trying to save mankind or something. And the person is whoever wrote this shit, whoever developed this shit, whoever thought it was a good idea to include this in the game. It's as stupid as when you're playing Metal Gear and suddenly Kojima himself appears and starts talking to Snake. Like, fucking hell, this is so retarded. Anyway, the TLDR for this whole schizo rant is that dogs are objectively superior, and I don't make the rules, sorry. The acting sometimes is pretty weird too, like the characters' bodies are overacting what they're actually expressing with their emotions.
I wanted to protect her! At least her. To preserve one thing dear to me in this whole wide fucked up world! Ah!
Maybe not now. Maybe not in this time. But there are possibilities. There have to be.
How are you so sure?
I know. You've been through a lot. And I believe you when you say who you are. And I don't want to give up now. Not when he came back. Not when we can try again.
It's uncanny, and it's not limited to this game, I've noticed. Usually UE5 games have this problem. What I think it is, and I'm pretty sure about this, is that as the graphics improve, as the models get more polygons and the characters look more and more like real humans, unfortunately this skill of the animators is not maintaining the same pace of advancement. Back in old games, especially from the PS2 generation and before, you could get away with shitty voice acting because the character models were so unrealistic, your mind filled in the blanks between the voice acting and the character acting, and so it made sense. Only the extremely autistic, like those who live in stream chats, find issue with old game voice acting. I love how everyone suddenly turns into a professional critic when it comes to voice acting in the original Silent Hill games, for instance. It's pretty cringe. But in Cronos, the problem is not even the voice acting. In these games, the problem is now the animations. It's that simple. This is a pretty minor issue at the end of the day, but there is one problem with it. These characters, these travelers, they talk like robots. What I mean is that they talk super slow. Sometimes they remind me of the Ents from Lord of the Rings. And that becomes a problem when there are unskippable cutscenes and the dialogue takes so fucking long. Like when you talk to the warden, it's optional by the way, but you can talk to him to learn more about the lore. But if you do, now you're stuck in a cutscene, you can't skip it, they talk super slow, you can't even skip ahead to dialogues. This is a very weird decision by Bloober not allowing you to skip these. And for the finisher, this game has too many unnecessary cutscenes. Everything you do, every weapon that you pick up, there's a cutscene to show you picking it up because they have to pad out the length of the game. And I take more issue with this because the more cutscenes your game has, the less immersive it is. And this is a horror game. It has to be immersive. That's all it has going for it. If it's not scary, then at least it has to be immersive. And for this reason, and many others that I've already talked about in this video, it's a minus. This is pretty basic stuff. Old games like System Shock 2 and Thief, their devs already understood that immersion is taken away when you take control away from the player, or if you change the context of the controls. And even more so if you have all these animations, like whenever you have to climb, control is taken away from you. Whenever you have to climb a ladder, control is taken away from you for a moment, and then the contextual controls are changed. Whenever you get caught by an enemy, same thing. When you have to squeeze through a passage or crawl through a crawl space, all these little animations, these clunky little things that take away control, and each time these things happen, it's a little bit of immersion that is lost. It is a simple psychological thing. Imagine that one day, out of nowhere, your body began to move by itself. You wouldn't think that you are moving it. You would think, wow, my body, what the hell is it doing? What the body is doing is dissociated from you. It's the same thing with these games. When these animations play out, it's not you doing the thing, it's the character. When control is stripped away from you, it is not you anymore. You are not the character. You are not in the game. You are not in the world, for however brief that moment may be. And if your horror game isn't immersive and isn't scary, then all there is left is the action. But then I'll just play some other game, to be honest, like Devil May Cry, like Dark Souls, like, you get the point, right? This is my fundamental issue with these games, with modern game design, to be honest, with repetitive gimmicks that are all made to be rewarding in a superficial way, that are Pavlovian in a sense. But again, feedback is what makes games fun, right? But the feedback has to come after you've earned it. If it's given out for free, it's going to cause burnout, and it's exactly what has happened to me. I'm sick and tired of these games, and I haven't even played that many of them. So to wrap things up, the game is pretty underwhelming. It's extremely formulaic in its gameplay. The characters are not interesting. It drags on for too long, and it's exhausting. And it has some subtle yet not so subtle woke ideological subversion in it. But the combat is an improvement over the Silent Hill 2 remake. Yes, Dark Souls combat with iframe dodging and rote memorization doesn't belong in a psychological horror. You don't need to be a genius to know that. It has some good ideas here and there, but they fall flat when the game prioritizes less interesting plot points over better ones, like the origin of the disease and all. And it has some spooky imagery that I liked, even though the game isn't scary at all. It's like there's a very dim ember that could have sparked into a great thing if only Bloober Team knew anything about horror and what makes a game scary overall. The most important takeaway from this is that the industry is still cooked. Bloober will keep doubling down on these stale cake recipe formulas for their horror games, and although this is better than their previous formula of boring slog walking simulators like Layers of Fear and The Medium, I already have zero hopes for their upcoming Silent Hill 1 remake, because since SH1 is way more bare bones than SH2, Bloober Team won't have as good of a pre-chewed blueprint they can use to copy their homework from. And with Silent Hill F being a stupid Souls-like, the future of the franchise has never been more grim. If that game does well, they will use its bad example for the SH1 remake, and it's gonna be even worse. I really hope I'm wrong, but I haven't been wrong about these things yet. That pretty much sums it all up. Do I recommend this game? No. Just play Dead Space instead. Anyway, subscribe for more yelling at clouds, and I'll see you later.